Alright, how's it going, everyone? Thanks for joining me on a new episode of the Music Reviewer Podcast with episode 56 of our album review series. Today we're talking about a new album. The album is Entertainment Death from the Philadelphia band Spirit of the Beehive. This album was released on April 9th, so we are about at that 1 month mark that I usually give myself to get to an album review. So here we are. And I'm glad I listened to this album. I'll say that just right now before we get too into the album review, or too deep into the album review. Sorry, but so yeah, stick around if you're interested in hearing my thoughts about this album, this critically acclaimed album at this point. Some prominent figures have reviewed it and have reviewed it positively. I think so. But before we get started, just want to let everyone know, a new episode of the album review series dropped about a week ago with the latest Brockhampton album, Roadrunner, New Light, New Machine. If you haven't listened to that album, go ahead and check it out. If you're a fan of hip-hop or Brockhampton, there's some stuff you might like on there. And also check out the review if you want to hear my thoughts on that. I was kind of indifferent towards it, but nonetheless, I thought there were some nice parts of the album. Overall, also, a new episode of Best and Worst Track of the Week for the week of May 1st. Premiered about, a few days ago, about a week ago at this point. Covering the majority of Slime Language 2. If you're interested on my take on several of the tracks that entered the Billboard Hot 100 that week, that episode is up and still relatively fresh on the podcast side. So yeah, if you have some time, check out that episode of Best and Worst Track of the Week. I thought there was some highlights and some nice moments on that project from what the batch of songs that we covered. And also, you can expect a new episode of Best and Worst Track of the Week to be coming out any day now, basically after this review. So yeah, let's just get into the bulk of this Entertainment Death review. So if you're not familiar with this band, Spirit of the Beehive, I don't blame you. They're a relatively small underground band from the East Coast of the United States, and I honestly didn't really know much about them until recently, and my morbid curiosity got the best of me, and I went ahead and checked out some of their stuff. They're an American indie rock band from Philadelphia. The band includes a member of the name Zach Schwartz, who is known for being part of a band, Glockamora, that was since been disbanded. And I honestly have never heard of the band, but they were active through the late 2000s to mid-2010s, and were known for being more of an emo punk act. Now, and the reason I really just bring that up is just mainly because I noticed that Spirit and the Beehive aren't really too set in like emo and punk, but there are flashes of it all throughout their music. So I guess a good way to just describe this band overall is being some sort of hybrid between experimental psych indie rock with several influences from various genres, electronica. There are some heavier parts where I'd say it's like from hard rock or even grunge type of stuff, and I guess punk. And when you get down to it, and I don't really know much. I don't really think emo is that prominent in it, but I guess if you had to make the case, you can probably find some sort of emo influence, just with how experimental the brand of rock that this band makes. And just some more background on the act. In 2014, they released a self-titled debut album, so that's at this point about 7 years ago, and then followed it with an EP in 2015, and in 2017 they released their sophomore album, which was titled Pleasure Suck. The band is relatively underground, like I mentioned earlier, not all that well known. I'll be honest, I don't know much about them, and the only reason I'm even reviewing the album today is because I watched a Needle Drop review a couple of weeks ago, and the review inspired me to give this album a listen. And I'm honestly glad I did, because one thing I noticed about this act is that they have a bit of like a typical Philly sound to them. When I'm talking about the Philly sound, it's just like a lot of indie rock and like underground rock that comes from the East Coast, with a bit of similarity to other acts such as Alex G, which is another like psych influenced experimental indie rock artist that I happen to be a fan of as well. And I'd say Spirit of the Beehive kind of falls in line with the qualities that I dig from acts like Alex G. So if you are familiar with Alex G, I'd say Spirit and the Beehive would probably be an act that you would have a good have a good time listening to if you're not familiar with their music. And at this point, I guess they have released a few albums. Their most recent one prior to Entertainment Death was their third one, Hypnic Jerks, which was released in 2018. And I actually liked this album as well when I went back and listened to it. The album kicks off with a colorful track, Nail I Couldn't Bite, that resembles some more underground indie acts such as like Madeline Kelly or like, to reiterate the point, Alex G. Like I mentioned earlier, Fell Asleep with the Vision is a captivating short indie rock cut that features some Strokes-like influence at times, especially in the drumming. The track then ends quite surprisingly with a section that doesn't really sound like it really belonged in the track overall, but then blended into the next track, Can I Receive the Contact, which is the title of the track. And this song displays the band's heavier side with some punk and rock influence and abrasiveness. The next, another track that I found to be captivating, Without You in My Pocket, features the band's more psych rock influence side with similarities to like acts, I don't know, like maybe Melody's Echo Chamber, something like that. And also this track features like a female vocalist on here who appears a number of times on this latest record, Entertainment Death, and she adds a nice dynamic to the band. And overall, like there's a title track too, Hypnic Jerks, that ends up sounding like parquet courts, like a parquet court sound with like how this vocals are stylized here. So again, this East Coast type of sound that we're getting, it's gonna find you. Another great track, features some nice dynamics with the swells and the vocals coming in and out as the track is introduced, and also the interesting build up on the track that's halfway through with quieter sounding moments ultimately building up to moments that take a complete left turn stylistically. It makes for an interesting listen overall, and overall it's a nice album. It's not bad, but I will say the band does take it a step further on this new project here, Entertainment Death. They kind of just leave no stone left unturned. To be cliche about it, they really just go there in terms of like the experimentation and what they're bringing to this style of rock. And compositionally, I think this is kind of a genreless album in a sense, especially with how unique most of these tracks sound. They don't conform to a normal songwriting structure. And to be specific, it's not really like verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. A lot of the times it's a lot of just like section A, section B, section C, maybe a section A-B hybrid sort of thing going on, or even just maybe like a nice section A and then out of nowhere curveball section B stylistically with how the band's going about things. So compositionally, it's an interesting take from track to track. The opening track, Entertainment, is chaotic with lots of uncertainty until we get to a moment where that suddenly features vocals and traditional instrumentation. So up until that point, it doesn't really sound like the band at all. It's just like some chaos going on. But the track does feature like lovely woodwind melodies that soar over at times, and it's a bit avant-garde for lack of a better term. We get a highlight next with the track There's Nothing. I like the faded and washed out vocals that are buried under like a dense bass group and then wonky guitars. It definitely has a bit of a noise-like quality, maybe some light shoegaze influence as well. A sudden alternative section to the track with a harsh color and maybe some more chaotic moments. So like I said, non-standard songwriting. It's just essentially like they do whatever they want on here. And like I said, the track kind of just has like some non-standard writing norms that just like have very chaotic sounding moments, and it makes for an interesting listen. The next track, Wrong Circle, didn't quite find to be all that of a highlight, but I like the track overall. I love the ambience that surrounds it, the light electronic elements that color everything so subtly, the simmer down development sections that create uncertainty, definitely some psych influence on here. It's an interesting track, with a lot of like electronica-like influence with the bright electronic elements thrown in that I mentioned earlier. And they just kind of emerge at certain moments in the track that just make the track all that much more better. Bad Sun was a highlight. I definitely dug the vibrant and clear electronic textures They're really pretty on this. The thin and wonky guitars that fill the space so nicely. The steady, dense bass groove on here is great. It's very dreamy, dream pop like. I'd say even like Sufjan Stevens like. I don't know if I said him right, but Sufjan Stevens. It just reminded me of some of his most recent work here. Give Up Your Life. I love the distorted and lo-fi introduction on this song. Another gritty and dense groove structuring here. The track overall, it's almost Alex G like. I know I keep making that point, but this band just takes a lot from that artist, or vice versa. I'm not sure. The fuzzy synth line doubling the vocal melody in the pre-chorus is a great moment. It's a very warm sounding track, but it's a bit sludgy towards the end. It's not a bad contrast to the rest of the tracks. Like I said, just like some contrasting songwriting, stuff going on. It's a nice listen. Next track, Rapid and Complete Recovery, I thought was great as well. A return to like some buried vocals on here and this track features some dreaminess and ambience. Another slow down and dense groove structuring the track. So I think the band is almost at best when they have like these dense grooves just kind of trucking along and making the song go forward. Some jumbled up voices as the track reaches a climax. It's a nice moment when that happens. Very similar to the last track in how it aims to envelop you as you're listening. It's not a bad track. The Server is Immersed is a good track as well. The beat drop at the beginning is amazing. The eerie and cutting synth lines color the track very nicely. The track just has like this dreadful mood, and not in a dreadful way that you just hate listening to it, but it just like it creates and evokes that sort of emotion and sense to it, and it's great. There's an immersive and dreamy ambience that you just kind of can get lost in, and it kind of just reminds me like how a Speedy Ortiz track would sound, or Still Woozy or something like that. It's kind of like a hybrid between those two artists. I didn't find another highlight until we skip over It Might Take Some Time. Wake Up in Rotation. The clean guitar line accompanying the vocal is quite a cool moment on this track. This track here sounds more of like a traditional guitar-driven track, sort of like a twisted Blur type of track. The anthem, there's some anthemic vocals with a more focused melody as well, especially as it develops more as the song progresses. And then also some nice light accompanying vocals that are thrown on. And by the time we get to the next highlight, the next song, I Suck the Devil's Cock, this is probably one of the best tracks on the album, which is how weird it is overall. It's filled with uncomfortable textures all throughout. The eerie horror movie-like sound playing thrown in the middle of the track is interesting. It gives the track a lot of sense of uncertainty. And we then go into like this dreamy Crumb the band, like jam section right after. So there's just like a lot of different turns that happen. And during that Crumb-like section, there's a husky deep bass groove that's carrying the track. That's quite nice. And the track goes through several mood swings, and I can just kind of feel like a mixtape of demos within one song. It's that, I guess, dynamic, and it's a bit too grandiose, but I think overall they capture what they're trying to do. And then we get kind of like a head-scratching ending with the track Death. It's definitely a much more simmered down track. It has a sludgy nature with how the slow harmonic progression and the ambient uncomfortable textures around it. The track does have the typical ending nature you would expect to like conclude a work of art. It dies out naturally as if it's withering, and it goes out softly with like this background static hiss. It's a bit of an unsettling ending though. There's definitely an uncomfortable sense you get from this track and the album overall as it ends. But overall, this is a pretty solid album. It's not bad. There's just a lot of different, I guess, hoops and hurdles this album takes you through. It's not like it's a chore to get through, but if you're not expecting what's coming, it can be a bit of like an interesting listen, especially if you're not familiar with this act, because I guess they were kind of hinting at this sort of thing on the last track, on the last album, Hypnic Jerks, but they just take it to a whole nother level on this album. And overall, I did enjoy the listen. I didn't really get tired of it the more I listened to it. Sometimes I really dig something I'm listening to the first time, and the more I listen to it, it probably just doesn't hit the same the second or third or fourth time. This album pretty much kept it at at the same level, or if not higher, in terms of enjoyment. So I really dug this album. I gave it a 7 out of 10. I really thought it was a good listen. And really, I think what it came down to is just I enjoyed the album as much as other projects I felt were around 7 out of 10s. Like one of the first albums I covered, the Hazel English project that was released about this time last year. The latest Arlo Parks album, kind of like in that sort of vein of enjoyment. I will say maybe I like this project a little bit better, but maybe not as much as other 8 out of 10s that I've had, like the latest Shame album, Drunk Tank Pink. But still a pretty solid listen. I recommend this album to anyone that's really interested in experimental, indie, psych rock, hybrid, just like genreless stuff. But this isn't I can already say this isn't not going to be for everyone, especially with how underground this band is still. But I can already say, like, this album is not going to be for everyone, especially with how uncomfortable and chaotic it sounds at times, especially with how it opens up. You really have to be patient with this album at times, or just kind of let it do its thing. But it is rewarding. I don't really think listeners of, like, maybe, standard hard rock, or maybe just like meat and potatoes alt rock are really going to be digging this, or even like the younger bedroom pop crowd. I think this certainly has its own niche, but it's a nice niche in my opinion, and I really dig, once again, this album. So if you are generally curious, though, check out this album, Entertainment Death by Spirit of the Beehive. I really dug it. But yeah, that pretty much concludes the review. If you stuck with me to the end of this episode, thanks for listening. My name is Josh. I'll be reviewing some more albums soon. Leave a like and subscribe on YouTube if you're digging what you heard. But also, if you're not digging it, leave a comment, good or bad. Or if you are digging it, I don't know. And then also subscribe on your preferred streaming service if you're going about it that way. But I'll see you later. Take care of yourselves.